The February 22nd legislative meeting of the Anne Arundel County Council is now in session. Please silence all electronic devices at this time. Please pause for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Volke, you may introduce your guest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am honored this evening to introduce a man who I've known since he was a boy, and we were in Royal Ambassadors together at church. He currently lives in District 2. He has a bachelor's degree in finance from UMBC, my alma mater. He has a master's in executive leadership from Liberty, and he has nearly completed his doctorate of ministry from the Baptist College of America. He attends Lighthouse Baptist Church, where he teaches on Sunday school on Sundays and leads the singing. He also has an excellent voice. I've heard him sing. He's not going to sing for us tonight. And he's a bus captain with the church's outreach into Curtis Bay. So Kyle Poulin, if you can come forward and lead us in the invocation. Stand? Yes.
Thank you, Councilman Volke, for asking me to pray. If you would join me in prayer in a manner that is consistent with your faith as I pray in a manner that's consistent with mine. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for tonight. God, we thank you for this council meeting. Lord, we thank you for our elected leaders here, Lord. We thank you for their service to our county. And God, we take this moment to acknowledge you. God, you tell us in your word that if we will acknowledge you, God, you'll direct our paths. And Lord, tonight we want to take a moment to just let you know, God, that you're welcome. Lord, we thank you for all that you've given us. And Lord, we want to acknowledge you so that you can direct our paths. God, I pray for each one of our council members. God, I pray that you would give them wisdom. God, that you would give them understanding. God, that you would give them courage and boldness as they make decisions on behalf of our county and the folks of Anne Arundel County. And God, I just pray that you would bless them, bless our county. And then, Lord, I just pray that you would be with us, Lord, as God, you tell us in your word that if your people, God, if we would humble ourselves, God, and seek your face and pray and turn from our wicked ways, God, that you would hear us. And Lord, that you would heal our land. And God, I pray that you would bring healing to our county, to our state, to our country. And God, we need more of you and not less. And God, I pray that you would just be among us tonight. God, we thank you for your goodness. God, we thank you for your grace. God, we love you in your heavenly, holy, precious name, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, please read the ethics statement.
The Ethics Commission has asked, but I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The Chairman of the Ethics Commission has asked that those who wish to testify in any form review the general information on lobbying sheet located on the Ethics website under Forms and Publications. If there are any questions about lobbying requirements, please contact the Ethics Commission at 410-222-4413.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will now open our invitation to audience. Madam Secretary, do we have any comments or communications on subjects not included in the printed agenda received from members of the public?
Yes, Madam Chair. We did receive 3 submissions through the online testimony tool that has included in a summary that is posted online. It went to the entire council and it will be added to the record.
Thank you. We will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council briefly on any subject not included on the printed agenda. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. Will the following persons please come up to the table, take a seat, and state your name and address for the record? And I have Jennifer Sell. Whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Sell. I live at 444 Linwood Drive in Severna Park, Maryland. Because I live in Severna Park, I don't really see any police. The only encounter I've ever personally had with Anne Arundel County Police was one that I initiated, although I now regret doing so. It is not a coincidence that I both live in Severna Park and I haven't encountered the local police. This is by design, and my experience is similar to other individuals who live in areas of certain demographics. I was once talking with a white friend who lives in Millersville. They predicted I would never get a speeding ticket from an Arundel County police officer because Severna Park residents aren't giving speeding tickets due to their being Severna Park residents. Although this is surely an exaggeration, the joke probably exists for a reason. And that reason is that police don't really get that involved in Severna Park because of its population. I bring this up because it is common for those in positions such as yours to hear from white people that our county doesn't need additional police accountability. However, when listening to these people, you should ask yourself, is this person statistically likely to be a target of increased police activity? Does this person live in an area where police are more likely to frequent based on their demographics? I ask you to ensure you are listening to those who are most impacted by police activity when making decisions on issues of police accountability, as those are the people who truly need their voices heard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If there is anyone else here who wishes to speak, please come up to the table and state your name and address for the record. All right, seeing no movement in the audience, the invitation to audience is now closed. Is there any item any council member would like to place on the agenda? All right. Seeing none, may I have a motion that the partial reading of any bill, resolution, amendment to a bill or resolution, or minutes constitutes the reading of the whole?
So moved. Allison Pickard.
Councilman Pruski, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Madam Secretary, please read the minutes of February 7th, 2022.
The meeting was called to order by Chair Rodvian at 7 p.m. and opened with the invocation given by Ms. Pickard, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. The meeting was held in the County Council Chambers, Arundel Center, Annapolis, Maryland. There were approximately 20 persons in the audience.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes of February 7th, 2022?
So moved. Allison Pickard.
Second, Councilman Pruski.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. The minutes of February 7th, 2022 stand approved as read. Madam Secretary, please read the titles of any bills to be introduced this evening.
Bill number 2222, an ordinance concerning Hollywood on the Severn Special Community Benefit District. Bill number 2322, an ordinance concerning approval of the lease agreement for Quiet Waters Retreat. Bill number 2422, an ordinance concerning personnel and public ethics, positions in the exempt service. Bill number 2522, an ordinance concerning general provisions, language access. Bill number 2622, an ordinance concerning public works, weeds and vegetation.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the titles of any resolutions to be introduced this evening.
Resolution number 422, resolution selecting SB & Company LLC, an independent firm of certified public accountants to perform the financial audit for fiscal year 22.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 5-22 as amended. Bill number 522, an ordinance concerning licenses and registrations, amusements, licensing of coin-operated amusement devices. Thank you. Mr. Pruski, this is your bill. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For those of you that did not attend the previous council meeting, I provided a genesis for this bill in regards to coin-operated devices, and we certainly learned more about state law and county law, and the bill was meant to obviously make it more competitive for small businesses to have coin-operated devices with the licensing feature, and in addition, we did have a clarification of prizes and awards. That amendment was passed. I don't think there's anything to add. Hopefully this will be a slam dunk, but we'll see, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barron, would you like to respond for the administration?
Happy to. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. Pete Barron for the record. With me at the table for questions is Ms. Velez from IMP and Mr. Ritter from Law. I don't know if you use the term slam dunk in pinball, but the administration commented on this bill as amended. We support it. I think it's a good bill. Looking forward to the signing.
Are there any questions from the council? All right, seeing none, we will now open the public hearing on bill number 5-22 as amended. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, there was nothing received ahead of time.
All right, we will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council on Bill number 5-22 as amended. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. There was no one signed up ahead of time, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, please come up to the table and state your name and address for the record. All right, seeing no movement, the public hearing on Bill number 5-22 as amended is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 5-22 as amended.
Bill number 522, an ordinance concerning licenses and registrations, amusements, licensing of coin-operated amusement devices.
Is there any further discussion from my colleagues? All right, seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 5-22 as amended.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Radvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 522 is passed.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 8-22.
Bill number 822, an ordinance concerning zoning 2022 Green Infrastructure Master Plan.
Mr. Barron, this is an administration bill. If you would like to begin or wait for your team, whenever you're ready.
I'll start introducing them because we got a bunch for this meeting. Pete Barron with the administration. Our environmental policy director, Matt Johnston, is here with me, as well as Christina Pompa, Michael Stringer, and Stephen Kai Ziegler from Office of Planning and Zoning, Erica Matthews from Rec and Parks, and Kelly Kenny from the Office of Law. So we discussed this bill at the work session. I know we've had many conversations with you all and understand there's a couple of amendments coming, and we'll comment at them at the appropriate time. But as a recap from our discussion at the work session, this plan sets up a framework for voluntary actions to conserve the largest connected natural areas in the county, as well as investing in green space in underserved communities. So let me be clear here. This plan is voluntary, and the administration has taken steps throughout the plan to state as clearly as possible that the plan does not create new development requirements. The plan does not change land use or zoning. It does not change the development review process. You can see, and I'll point to a couple of places in the document, on page 12, the inclusion of property in the network does not change zoning or development requirements. Page 15, under how to use this plan is not a regulatory document. On page 16, under the heading Private Property Rights, this plan does not create any new requirements for private property owners and upholds their rights to steward their own land. The plan is not regulatory. It does not change zoning or development requirements or otherwise limit or change property rights. I could go on. There's several more examples in the document. But what does this plan do? This plan helps guide where the county will be making investments and sets a conservation goal that we can hold ourselves accountable to and track progress. That goal is to conserve 5,000 more acres of land by 2030. That would result in over 30% of the county's land being conserved in the network by 2030. That's ambitious, but we've already achieved a good chunk of that goal. We're at 29% of the county's land is conserved in the network already. And this is conserved through voluntary actions or county investment. I'm going to turn it over to Michael Stringer to make a few comments, as he's put a lot of work into this plan, and then happy to answer any council questions.
Thank you. And thank you, council members. Again, my name is Michael Stringer. I'm a senior planner with the Office of Planning and Zoning in the Long Range Planning Group. And I've been honored to work the course of the last year with our partners in Department of Recreation and Parks, as well as Bureau of Public Works and the Forestry Group and Inspections and Permits on this plan, as well as with a lot of community members and constituents who have helped out with this. So to add on to what Mr. Barron said, if the plan is not regulatory, what's it about? There was a beautiful editorial written in the Capitol the other day, you might have seen, where they talked about this being a legacy, and I think that's an important concept for this. These plans like this, like the 2002 Greenways Plan that it updates and replaces, They create a legacy of what are preserving the greatest natural spaces in the county, connections between them, so that they create a system that is where the sum is greater than the whole parts. It's voluntary. So how do we use it? We use it to prioritize where our limited public funds go toward conservation. When we go apply to the state for program open space funds, they look to see, do we have a plan for where these monies are going? Are we putting them in a focused way? When we're reaching out to property owners so that they can see how they are connected, we intentionally put spaces and information in the plan to give property owners information, whether they ever want to talk to a county employee or a nonprofit land trust about an easement or not, about how they can steward their land if they want to for natural health and human health. We also teach them in the plan about the benefits of conservation for themselves as property owners, the opportunities for tax incentives, both at the local and federal level. So this plan is also important to think about as the context of its implementation of Plan 2040, the plan, comprehensive general development plan for the county that was adopted by this council last year. In that plan, we talk about the need for redevelopment and revitalization over areas like the town centers, like Odenton and Payroll. We'll see master plans for those areas come before the council later this year, as well as the need for conservation and parks and recreation. So this helps dovetail with those plans, help support and guide the lands that we conserve while promoting the areas where we want to see growth go. Community engagement has been fundamental to the effort here. Throughout the planning process, we've held public forums. We've gone out when we could in the summertime and when the COVID rates were low to like the Glen Burnie Farmers Market. We went to community events to try to get the words out to average folks. We held virtual public forums. We partnered with Department of Recreation and Parks as they did outreach for the Land Preservation Parks and Recreation Plan, had public surveys, public forums. We also met with stakeholders, folks who are deeply engaged in this work, like nonprofit land trusts, as well as the development interests, like the Maryland Building Industry Association and NIOP, to understand their concerns with this plan too. And what we've put forward for you to look at is a plan that we believe is balanced, that takes into consideration the aspirations for natural land conservation that we hear from so frequently when we talk to the public about what they want to see in the future in this county, as well as the interests of private property owners and developers who want to make sure that development interests and rights are protected. So with that, I look forward to hearing the public testimony this evening and taking questions from the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stringer. Do any of my colleagues have questions? All right. Seeing none for now, we will now open the public hearing on Bill number 8-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
Yes, Madam Chair. We did receive 23 submissions of testimony through the online testimony tool and one email that has all been shared with the council and added to the record. The 23 online submissions are also included in the summary that is posted online.
Thank you. We will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council on Bill number 8-22. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. I have the following names of folks who've signed up: Matt Minahan, Michael Hebb Sr., Kate Fox, and Sarah Nabel. And you may all come down to the table. You may proceed, yes.
Great, thanks. My name is Matt Minahan, 3651 First Avenue, Edgewater, Maryland. Thanks for taking this on, and thanks for considering this bill to the council. I represent the neighbors of the Mayo Peninsula and our strong support for the Green Infrastructure Master Plan, and we hope that you and the council will offer its unanimous support. We might wish the plan had more requirements to enforce the preservation of forests and native species. We might wish the plan had more retention for bioretention and stormwater and connected open spaces. We might wish the plan had more requirements and obligations to enforce the county's good intention of preserving forests and open space. We might wish the plan preserved more green space. We might wish the plan included a dedicated funding plan through 2030. But we fully support the intentions of this plan. Its goals and ambitions are the right ones for Anne Arundel County and for the environment. Given the value of forests and conserved lands to the preservation of our rivers and the Chesapeake Bay, this master plan is one of the most important elements of the future. And finally, I'll just say that the lessons of the Forest Conservation Act I hope they're observed here. When members of this council insisted on amendments that were approved and then did not vote for the Weekend Forest Conservation Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I apologize. I don't remember if it's a silent K.
You did great. It is Niebel. So I am Sarah Niebel, the Executive Director of Scenic Rivers Land Trust, which is a nonprofit dedicated to protecting the natural and scenic areas in Anne Arundel County. This Green Infrastructure Master Plan is a key piece in the county showcasing its conservation priorities, similar to the Maryland Department of Natural Resources declaring its own areas of focus for conservation, such as its targeted ecological areas. The plan doesn't force landowners into conservation, just like the DNR's TEA maps don't. In fact, this plan helps provide more options to landowners in planning for their property. The more a property shows up on all of these conservation priority maps, be it on the federal, state, or local level, it provides more persuasion to land trusts, funders, and the IRS to say that it is worthy of permanent protection and dedicate scarce funding. A property in a greenway will score higher in these priority assessments when funding is being allocated for conservation projects. This means if a landowner is interested in conserving their land, they are more likely to be able to sell a conservation easement or sell their property fee simple to a land trust or a conservation-minded government agency. Even if the landowner instead wants to donate a conservation easement, a land trust is more likely to accept a conservation easement on a property in a greenway, and the donation is viewed with less scrutiny by the IRS. The Internal Revenue Code allows deductions for 4 main conservation purposes. One of them is that the easement is pursuant to a governmental conservation policy. Often I'll state in the easement that a property is within a county greenway to bolster the argument that this property has a qualified conservation purpose under the IRC. So I encourage that the County Council approve the plan as is without the amendments. We are quite opposed to amendment number 2 in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there is anyone else here who wishes to speak, please come up to the table. Oh. And we'll just go from my right to left. State your name and address for the record. Mr. Curran.
Good evening, Chairwoman Rodby and Vice Chair Pruski and members of the Council. For the record, Connor Curran, District 3. I'm here to encourage the Council to pass Bill 822. Our county needs green infrastructure as it has economic, environmental, and recreational benefits. This legislation will support a $1.3 billion industry in our state that supports fishing, hunting, and wildlife viewing. This legislation will help preserve farmland for agricultural jobs, agritourism, and local food production. It's important that we support these efforts to guide our economy to behave in a green-friendly manner. The environmental opportunities in this legislation are really exciting. Bill 822 gives us the opportunity to protect the quality of our surface and groundwater. Protecting our natural features and scenic vistas are important to our county's character. We are known for our beautiful coastlines and neighborhoods, making us the best place for all. As the climate crisis becomes more of a concern every single day, it's important that we address poor air quality, flooding, and heat islands. As a coastal county, climate change directly affects our community and needs to be met with aggressive action. This legislation is a perfect opportunity to take this action. Our Department of Recreation and Parks does a fantastic job supporting recreation opportunities for our citizens. Bill 822 provides further investment for our citizens to enjoy our beautiful scenery in Anne Arundel County. It's important that we invest in this infrastructure opportunity to conserve 30% of our county's landscape. It's time for Anne Arundel County to support green infrastructure. We've made the progress with our forest conservation legislation, but we are at high risk during this climate crisis. And it's time that we take action like this matters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Melanie Hartwig Davis, 501 Bayview Point Drive, Edgewater. Chair Ravian, members of the council, thank you for this opportunity to voice my support and to encourage your support for the Green Infrastructure Master Plan. As the environmental member for the Plan 2040 efforts, and also now as a Planning Advisory Board member, I have been watching this closely and enthusiastically, and it's great to see it here now finally before you. Offering amendments to this master plan simply serves as an insult to the experts who assimilated the scientific GIS data indicated in the map and the extensive outreach that county staff led with your engaged constituents. This plan will provide the framework needed for voluntary conservation of Anne Arundel County's environmental features that our citizens value and the health of our waterways depend on. This plan will foster redevelopment, encouraging the utilization of parcels already devoid of nature rather than destroying more of our forests that provide habitat for wildlife. This plan will incentivize the creation of green spaces in neighborhoods that have been denied the opportunity for healthy outdoor recreation. This plan will help connect our communities with trail systems for biking, hiking, and walking. This plan will reduce millions and millions of taxpayer dollars that go to restoring our streams, our rivers, and our Chesapeake Bay. This plan will reduce the millions and millions of taxpayer dollars that are spent managing stormwater runoff, flooding our homes and our yards. To those naysayers who claim that this will impair our development in the county, I say shame on you for your lack of vision for the potential that Anne Arundel County has. Anne Arundel County Council, please vote yes for Bill 822 without amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. Eric Fisher, I'm the Maryland Assistant Director for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I'm also an urban planner and a proud District 5 resident. Here in support of Bill 822 as introduced. This is about effective stewardship of our land and our money. Green Infrastructure Plan is a plan by and for people. It has a rich history in our state, going all the way back to the early 1990s with the Maryland Greenways Commission, which was a stakeholder-driven process that kicked off decades of green infrastructure planning and investment. This culminated in the early 2000s with Anne Arundel County's Greenways Plan, which won awards. So we have a proud history here in our own county with green infrastructure. And we are benefiting from that work today, from those investments today, through cleaner stormwater, cleaner air, and cooler developed areas as our forests provide environmental services. Individuals are also benefiting through tools and dollars for those who want to voluntarily conserve their property and protect their land. Green infrastructure plans are about coordination. They do not take land. In fact, the state has prohibited the condemnation of land for green infrastructure. What it does do is bring scientific data and people together to identify the best bang for our conservation dollar. In fact, this is how the state decides how to spend their money. Program Open Space, Rural Legacy are all based heavily on green infrastructure. That's why other counties like Hartford, Howard, Frederick, Cecil, Baltimore City, and Talbot have recently updated their plans. And frankly, my friends, this is competition because we have a limited number of dollars. We need to make sure that Anne Arundel County is in this game and leading. We had an award-winning plan at the beginning. Let's follow up strong. Please adopt the plan as introduced.
Thank you.
Good evening, members, esteemed members of the council. My name is Fernando Barrow III. I'm running for county executive, and one of the reasons I'm running for county executive is I'm concerned about this bill. Conservation laws are very important. They are very important for our community, but they also, my concern is that they affect the property rights and the constitutional rights of the members of our community. Okay, I have firsthand experience the abuse of power by planning and zoning, inspections and permits, where the code calls me to allocate 15% of my property to be developed, and yet I have used 7.5% of my property, actually 7.7, but 0.2% of that is gravel. Apparently, planning and zoning considers gravel as impervious, so it has to be accounted to that. Recently, I put a permit for a pool, was denied. simply because the county, and when I say the county, planning and zoning and inspection permits, considers that my application is not a necessity. It is simply a convenience. Now, who gets to determine what is a convenience and what is a necessity? Okay? I believe the owner of the property is the one who has to determine that. And if the state has allocated 15% of the property for me to be developed, the planning and zoning should allow that to happen. As I read through the plan says on page 8 that increases property value from 10 to 20%. I'm going to have a very hard time selling my property. By law, I need to disclose the limitations. And by limitations, I mean 100% of my property is restricted. 100%. So in trying to sell my property, it's not going to increase 10 to 20%. In fact, it's probably going to devalue that value.
Please conclude your remarks.
Okay. I just am very concerned about the overreach and abuse of power by planning and zoning when it comes to conservation land. So I am not opposing, I'm not affirming the plan. I just simply would like it for you to consider any safeguards for the citizens that have these restrictions already. Thank you.
Thank you. One last call. This panel is dismissed. One last call for anyone in the audience who would like to come down and share their thoughts on Bill number 8-22. All right, seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 8-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 8-22.
Bill number 822, an ordinance concerning zoning 2022 Green Infrastructure Master Plan.
Thank you. There is at least one amendment. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1. This amendment clarifies that the Green Infrastructure Network map is a conceptual map and that future land use decisions will be informed by site-specific studies.
Thank you. Ms. Pickard and Mr. Volke, as the sponsors, you may make a statement regarding your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Volke, for co-sponsoring my amendment. But mainly I want to thank Mr. Stringer for working with me to craft this language. We worked together collaboratively to make sure that the Green Infrastructure Network map is conceptual and that future land use decisions will be informed by site-specific studies. I don't know how to say it, but he was very careful in figuring out that page 12, page 34, and page 55 could use additional language to make some folks feel a little more secure about how the maps were created and how they're delineated in the plan. So I want to thank the administration for the collaboration, and we probably need to move on with we need to adopt it, don't we? We need to. We're talking before we're make a motion to adopt.
Yes. All right. Is there a motion to adopt?
Ms. Pickard, you want the honor?
I'll make a motion to adopt amendment number 1.
Second.
All right. Is there any additional discussion?
Madam Chair?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, just for the record, Pete Barron with the administration, got the same team up at the table with me. As the sponsor of the amendment noted, we worked together on this language. You'll note there are many other places in the plan that flag that this plan, as we've said over and over again now, is for planning purpose and not regulatory and does not affect private property rights. We're comfortable with this amendment if it helps clarify the public's understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Any questions from my colleagues? I will jump in with one, and this is maybe for Mr. Barron, maybe for the Office of Law. Actually, it's probably for the Office of Law. In your mind, or as you review this amendment, do you see this as adding anything to, the understanding that's already in the bill with respect to this Bill 822 not having any, regulatory effect, not having any change to landowners' property rights or developers' rights or the process or anything like that? Do you see this making any change?
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney. No, I think this just enhances what the plan already does and just clarifies that, but doesn't make any changes with regard to what you've asked about.
Okay, thank you very much. Any additional questions from my colleagues? All right, seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. Hare may be offering 1 or 2 amendments. Yes, okay. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 2.
Amendment number 2. This amendment makes Bill number 822 contingent upon certain notice to property owners of their property being newly included in the 2022 Green Infrastructure Network. Allows for property owners to opt in or opt out of the 2022 Green Infrastructure Network. Requires the 2022 Green Infrastructure Master Plan be revised to show all properties excluded from the Green Infrastructure Network, and delays the effective date of any ordinance that relies on the Green Infrastructure Network.
Thank you. Ms. Hare, as the sponsor, you may make a brief statement about your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I think actually, Madam Secretary, that was fairly self-explanatory, I think. But just to give a little bit of background, I do think it's important that the plan incentivizes, conservation and things like that. I also think that the engagement of the plan was not as high as it could have been. I thank the administration for the briefing that they gave me about the plan, but there were about 2,500 folks who I think viewed the maps when it was put out for the public comment period, and only 60 comments. And then when it was put out in front of the PAB, I believe it was, there were about 3,500 folks in the county that viewed it and 120 comments. During that time period, there were, I believe, 53 homeowners who reached out and said, I would like to not be part of this plan. And the county did allow them to opt out of the plan. And so that's just not a huge number of folks, 2,500 or 3,500 that viewed it. And I think it's important as a fundamental fairness for folks, if we are kind of putting an overlay, even if it's voluntary, of sorts, that we give homeowners direct notice. It's something we do if there's a rezoning. It's something we do at the critical area when those lines are done. And I just think giving them the opportunity to say, hey, your property is being included in here, check this box if you'd like to opt in, check this box if you'd like to opt out, but just so that you know what we're doing at the county. And so this amendment does just that, as Madam Secretary said, gives them the opportunity to say, yes, I'd like to participate, no, I wouldn't. I think that also helps us know, again, even more where those dollars might be concentrated, because folks will have affirmatively said, I'm interested in this. And from a fairness standpoint, give those folks notice. So with that, I would move to adopt.
All right, is there a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
And actually, thank you. Mr. Barron, would you like to respond?
Thanks, Madam Chair. The administration opposes this amendment. As we've stated before, we believe this amendment is unnecessary in part because of the previous amendment and the contents of the plan in the several areas that I noted, as well as Mr. Stringer, that this plan is not regulatory. To the question the maker of the amendment raises around providing notice, all of the examples that were given were regulatory actions by the county, a critical area action, etc. Again, this plan is meant to guide county investment, not change private property rights. And I'll just note one particularly troubling feature of this amendment is the requirement that folks are automatically opted out if they don't respond to the notice, because again, they would be opting out of something that doesn't affect their private property rights. We're setting the system up so that it would be automatically opted out of the plan when it doesn't affect their rights. So no other master plan does the county require to provide this kind of opt-in. This wasn't a requirement in 2002. This was not a requirement for the multiple maps that comprise the general development plan. This was not a requirement of the 2017 Preservation Parks and Recreation Plan. So I'll just reiterate, I understand the desire to provide the public with notice. I think the county has done a good job making sure that this plan was advertised and out there. And I think we would be having a different discussion if this were a regulatory document. Mr. Stringer or Mr. Johnson, feel free to add any additional, unless you think I got it.
All right, Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. I did go through, I don't have my sticky note with me, it's at my home office, but I went through and I noted the pages and the paragraphs where non-regulatory is noted in the document. My question is, this document and this bill is non-regulatory. Thinking forward, could there be a bill that says this map is now going to be part of this regulatory action? I know I'm trying to...
Could there, Pete Barron with the administration, could there be a bill in the future that does that? That would require 4 votes, a public hearing, advertisement, and all of that. So, okay. I mean, we could also, I could draw a map on the back of a napkin, and that could be incorporated in a bill. So I think the work that went down from the professionals in using the best available technology to map our natural resources to guide future investment was great work. If a future council or a future regulatory action would need to be taken, the administration could not do that unilaterally. It would require council action.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, Madam Secretary, can you please add me as a co-sponsor on the amendment? Thank you. So I think the point that Councilwoman Fiedler is getting to is the same concern that I have, which is sort of the one shoe, other shoe. Is there another shoe that's coming? I take you at your word that this administration isn't planning to bring down any regulatory action for this map, but I think what it does is it now adds more land into this new mapped area that all of a sudden could easily be grabbed for a secondary bill. So I guess the question I would have for the administration is Councilwoman Hare's amendment that I'm going to co-sponsor, I think provides a protection for that by ensuring that no one's property is going into this map that hasn't affirmatively said, hey, I want to be part of this. I think this is an important piece for our county to move forward, that I should be involved in this. Obviously, the Rec and Parks Master Plan deals with Rec and Parks, so that's already county property. You know, we're talking about the GDP. That's us basically looking at the whole county. We do it, everybody knows it's coming. My concern is there may be people who don't realize that they're included in this new map. I mean, I put this out a couple months ago, and I think that was one of the reasons that a number of people reached out and said, please take me out of this, I don't want to be involved. I just wonder what's the opposition to giving people that choice to affirmatively opt in?
Was that a question?
Yeah, I guess that's the question is like, what's the harm in saying you actually have to affirmatively say you want to be a part of this, as opposed to we're including you and there was an opportunity you could have gotten out. Because what you're going to do is, now if we've got an amendment, we've got another 2 weeks, if people don't want to be involved in this, now we're going to be piecemeal pulling people out, right? If people reach out to us, there's going to be a whole series of amendments pulling individual parcels out. This deals with that in a much more elegant way. Why would we rather do piece by piece pulling things out as people contact us after they hear about this?
again, the map is not regulatory. I think the cost to do that is a small factor, but the more important issue here is this map is not regulatory. What this map does is, as you heard from some of the experts who testified from the public, it provides a way for the county to look at the entire county, where the resources are, where the critical natural infrastructure is, and how can we best leverage the limited dollars that both the private sector and the public sector have to conserve our natural resources to meet some very critical goals that our future generations will thank us for, without forcing any individual property owner into a deal or a easement or a program that they don't want to be a part of. Again, this is not a regulatory map. It is meant to educate the public and the county and the private sector on where we can most effectively make our investments. So I think the concern we have with this amendment is the way it's structured, and I mentioned that, but also that it's unnecessary to protect individual private property rights.
I believe, Mr. Pruski, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question, and this relates to the bill itself in terms of time. So in two places it states that there's 60 days to opt out, but then Section 7 takes 45. So this is to the law office. Is it 105 days then? Because again, if the bill is signed or when it goes into effect, so I just want to be clear the intention, because I see two different things here.
To clarify, you're referring to the amendment, right? To the amendment.
Correct.
Okay.
Kelly Kenny, Supervising County Attorney, and Ms. Hare may be able to speak a little bit to her intention. I didn't do the math to figure out the number of days. Do you know what your intent was?
So it's the Section 6 where, I'm sorry, Section 7 where it says, that subject to Section 5 of this ordinance, the ordinance shall take effect 45 days from the date it becomes law. So subject to Section 5 is where OPZ gives the notice, and then folks have the 60 days to opt in or opt out. So it's 30 days for planning and zoning to send the notices, 60 days for folks to reply back, and then 45 days till it becomes law. So I think that's 135 if I added that correctly, but yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then the next question, and this goes back to, they just had a Board of Appeals hearing, and I saw them today. Critical Area Commission. So my understanding, the state has the Critical Area Commission. They don't notify homeowners when they change the boundaries. It's just a public notice, right? So there's no thing that goes out that I'm aware of that, say for instance, the state says this was an area that was, critical area, but we're expanding it unless they do something with their property. Am I correct? So I don't know if there's notice with that. I was just curious if anybody knew on the panel.
Yeah, I actually checked with, I'm sorry. Forgot, haven't been here for a while. Thanks. Matt Johnson, Environmental Policy Director. Happy to see you all in person this evening. I actually checked with the Office of Planning and Zoning earlier today on that very issue, Councilman, so thank you for bringing that up. In the last go-around, the properties that had more than a 1% change, more than 1% of their property was being added to a different critical area designation, they were notified by mail, and there were 2 public hearings for them to go and express their interest. Now the difference I would say between that and this, that designation has regulatory impacts, very big regulatory impacts. This designation of being in or out of the green infrastructure has no regulatory impacts. And the same thing is true, Office of Planning and Zoning would tell you about zoning changes. If a zoning change is proposed, that individual is also notified, and that's a change in what you can do with your land. This is not a change in what you can do with your land.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm just going to give a comment. So where I was going with that is, again, when you're showing the difference between regulatory and non-regulatory, the GDP is a plan, but we go to regional plans, that could be changed. So I'm just trying to figure out here, I understand the public notice piece, but the regulatory, non-regulatory, that's what is really the crux here that I'm trying to figure out. Thank you.
Ms. Lacey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since I've spoken with several of the people on the council and on the panel today. I want to try to distill down my comments because I've changed my thoughts and my thinking at least a dozen times since about 8 o'clock this morning, or maybe it was 8:30 when when Ms. Hare and I were texting. So distilling it down, putting aside, I could tell you a lot about notice, I could tell you a lot about regulatory versus guidance, but I think what really is where I'm stuck with this bill overall is we're adopting a plan as the county, and we have allowed people to opt out who didn't actually have a right to opt out. They don't have an enforceable right to opt out of this plan. What I would really prefer to do overall is have an amendment that brings those 53 parcels or landowners' properties, whatever they are, back in the map, because the data supports them being part of the infrastructure. And what I'm seeing us do in having this debate is that what we're doing is we're talking about a couple of different ways to treat similarly situated people. And I think we need to pick one. Either they're all included, or we give everybody the option to be excluded from the plan. They should be treated the same. And unless somebody has a better rationale for distinguishing between these two groups, none of whom asked to be included in the plan in the very first place, as far as I know, then all that we're talking about here is potentially undermining a lot of great work and the potential for a lot of great projects and conservation that we could achieve by giving everyone a right to opt out of something they don't actually have the right to do. And we don't have to recognize they're opting out.
If I may, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Thank you, Councilwoman Lacey. So I'm going to ask probably Michael Stringer from Planning and Zoning to talk a little bit about the process of public review that this plan went through, and maybe you can highlight some of the specifics where different decisions were made.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barron. Again, Michael Stringer with Office of Planning and Zoning. So the differences I see between the amendment and what was done previously is that what we did previously through the planning process is we gave the public the opportunity to review the maps. So we made that publicly available, and we gave people ability to give comments. Based on our experience, we knew that if you put properties on a map, you will get property owners who say, what's going on, I have concerns. The difference between what we did then and what's proposed now in this amendment is that property owner's request was then followed up by staff analysis, where we could look at that property against the criteria that we used to create the map and think about what the implications of it would be. So for instance, if we had property owners who were on the very edge of the network, and removing them would not affect the integrity of it. It still maintained its size, it still maintained its connectedness. If we go this route with a automatic default that if you don't say, yes, I want to be in, you're out, what you will get is something that's not a network anymore. That fundamental principle of connectivity will be broken. When you think about sending this out, think about when we send out surveys. Mail surveys, you're probably lucky to get 10 or 20% response rate. A lot of people will not respond to this just because they wouldn't respond to anything. And then they would be automatically out. I think you would end up with a map that is just, it's no longer a network, does not meet the fundamental principles of what this is trying to do with that process. So again, I appreciate the fairness concern that Ms. Hare brought up, and the concern that you bring up about treating people differently. And I would say the difference is that different place in the process and the evaluation that follows up to see what is the impact on the map if that change is made.
Madam Chair, may I ask a follow-up of Mr. Stringer?
Go ahead.
Can you provide the data on those 53 or however many folks were allowed to opt out?
Yes, certainly. We could provide addresses. We can talk to you about what you would like for.
Or we could meet and look at a map or whatever, something like that.
It's actually available on the interactive web viewer. There is multiple layers available when you click on our website and look at that map viewer. There is a at the top of the list of layers you can click on. There is a list for areas removed from the draft plan. So that speaks to the draft that was released in the summertime for public review. So you can actually see that there. I'd be happy to sit down with you and look through it.
Great. I'll follow up with you. Thank you.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Just a couple of quick follow-ups. I want to note a couple of things. This notice would only be required to go to anyone who was added in who wasn't in the 2002 map, right? So it's the new parcels that have been added in. So in terms of kind of destroying the network, so to speak, that Mr. Stringer just mentioned, I mean, what was there is still there, and it's just anything that's been added in since then, those property owners would get notice under this. I do appreciate Councilwoman Lacey's comment about treating folks the same, because I think the fact that planning and zoning had a process for folks to be removed in the first place is critical to looking at how we treat the county as a whole. And it's my understanding, Mr. Stringer mentioned that there was an analysis done of whether or not those properties should be removed or not, but planning and zoning removed every single property who asked to be removed. So it's not like there was a process where planning and zoning said, oh, we're going to look at this one. Just kidding. We're not going to remove that one. We are going to remove this one. In fact, it's my understanding from talking to planning and zoning that if one home in a subdivision asked to be removed, planning and zoning actually went through and removed anyone else in that area as well for purposes of consistency. So there is kind of this now massive inconsistency between who's been notified and removed themselves and who hasn't. And I think I do think that that's a big point, a big concern. In terms of the regulatory nature of critical area and zoning and things like that, this isn't regulatory yet, but we have heard there could be future legislation that comes out that does refer back to this plan or rely on this plan or the maps that are part of this plan. And the property owners aren't necessarily going to get an individual notification at that point if greenways, if certain X, Y, or Z is not allowed in an area that's been designated as a greenway, or if a green notice comes out from planning and zoning, individual parcels are not going to get that notification. We already have the regulations that apply to the critical area, which is why, that notice can go out now. But I do think I can see this plan being used in the future and in many good ways. But I do think it's important that since it has that potential, we need to make sure folks are aware in advance. And so with that, I would ask for my colleagues' support.
Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'm having a rough day today. So I think it would be helpful if we all went back to the 2002 Greenway map and then we look forward. We know over the last, I've had 3 or 4 briefings on this, so I'm a little extra. We know we conserved about 5,000 acres over the last decade, but we also know that many parcels, lots of land that was in the 2002 Greenway has since been developed, which is why now we're updating the map. So there's a history of both conservation and development of parcels in the Greenway, and it really will be about how this body moves forward in the next decade about land conservation. We also know that about 20% of those 5,000 acres that have been preserved over the last 10 years were done in the development process with easements and forest conservation and things like that. So if you are in, I know there's a lot of folks anxious about their property being now seen, whether it's mixed use or commercial or even industrial. But at this moment in time, those parcels are connected in some way to a hub or a corridor, and they are green. That doesn't change their developability in any way based on many, many, many citations to the effect in this plan. So I feel like amendment number 2 is just defeating the whole goal of what not only Anne Arundel County is doing, but many of our counties, Harford County, Cecil County, Howard County, Montgomery County, we're all looking to ways to enhance conservation and have better smart growth and things like that. I think this amendment is just over the line. I will oppose.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a follow-up question to Ms. Hare's comments. The additions I know are things like open space and some of our trails. Do you have any data as far as of the additional land that is in this plan? How much of it is private property and how much of it is county or open space, et cetera, that wouldn't necessarily fall under the private property umbrella?
I believe Mr. Stringer can enlighten us.
Yes, we actually conducted that analysis. Mr. Volke asked us the same question last week, so I'll try to cite the numbers and make sure that I get them correct here. It's important to know that the map did evolve. As Ms. Picker just stated, that there are areas that are removed. So there are developments, you could think of Tanyard Cove, that was in the greenways, that's now developed. Those properties are removed. So there are places that have been removed, then places that are added. So for let me get to my spreadsheet in the bottom line. The net difference is that there's approximately 35,000 acres that have been added to the network. About 28,000 acres of that are private. And I believe the analysis that we did, though I don't have the number written in front of me, about 40% of that is already conserved. So though it may be private, it may have a conservation easement on it, such as forest conservation easement, or set aside in the subdivision process as open space and recreation area.
Sorry, Ms. Lacey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of follow-up questions. First, what would need to be done to actually add those 53 back in before we were to, if we were to make an amendment at the next meeting, what would we have to do?
I'm going to defer maybe to Office of Law, but as Mr. Stringer noted, it's probably you take the layer and...
Well, I understand that part, but what else would we have to do?
I think we would have to amend the plan, and I think the general development plan, some of those amendments probably would guide us. We would just have to reference where they would be and add them back in, but I'm doing Office of Law's job poorly, so I'm going to turn it over to them.
No, that was pretty good. Kelly Kenny, Supervising County Attorney. Yes, I think that you could do an amendment similar to the many that we did with the GDP, which would, you would have OPZ do a new map and include those properties and then do an amendment to adopt those maps.
Not to assist on this question, but I've had the opportunity to sit back, and normally I'm at the table, but I have a thought, and I'm hoping it would be helpful. But I think what's clear is there's concern that the Greenway Master Plan, as presented, infrastructure plan, could at some point in the future be turned into a regulatory document. And I understand that, and I just want you to think for a moment how that would happen. Right now, the Office of Planning and Zoning, working with our partner agencies, the administration, has clearly produced what we intend to be a non-regulatory plan. We've inserted in various pages different parts of the plan language that confirms that it's not regulatory. With Councilman Volke and Pickard's bill, you've enhanced that. So there's language spread throughout this plan that it's not regulatory. I can tell you that's absolutely our intent. I wouldn't know how to use it as a regulatory tool if adopted as is. But I would say this. If there was at some point in the future a desire to make it a regulatory plan, how would we do that? And I'm thinking, well, we would pull that plan out and we would have to remove all of those safeguards we've provided to property owners that it's not regulatory. We would have to create new policy language that would go into the plan that says, whoop, we've changed our mind, now it's regulatory, and here's the policy things we're trying to get to through a regulatory process. We would probably have to go back in and amend Plan 2040 because the new green infrastructure plan would not be consistent with what we adopted last May. And along with the policy language, we would probably have to create a series of code changes that would allow implementation of a regulatory scheme. All of those would be a very step-by-step process of amending in a significant way an adopted plan, amending probably Plan 2040, creating text that would go into the county code to regulate development in a way that no one is contemplating now. And I'm only sharing that because those are the steps that we would have to take in order to make this a regulatory plan. I hope that helps.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
I think that was very helpful. And I really just have one more question, and this is for Ms. Kenny. Since this plan is entirely voluntary, and we've emphasized over and over again that it's voluntary and that it's not regulatory, why is this before us as an ordinance rather than a resolution?
Kelly Kenny, Supervising County Attorney. I think that it's just, it probably could have come either way before the council. I think that we looked to how it was done in 2002, and it was also adopted as a bill at that time. And it just seems like something that is more appropriately adopted as a bill. A resolution is usually not something so substantive as this, so I think that's why that choice was made. But I think we look back to the past practices as well.
If we did do it as a resolution, would that help to establish the voluntary nature of this guidance document?
Kelly Kenny, Supervising County Attorney. No, I don't think that would make a difference, because I think that the wording in the plan and in the bill itself, makes it clear that it is voluntary regardless of whether it's a bill or a resolution.
Thank you.
Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kaiser, thank you for that. I appreciate that step-by-step. I have no doubt that there are smart people in the county who could figure out how to do that step-by-step process, but I appreciate you explaining what would have to happen to get there. I also appreciate Mr. Stringer getting me very good responses to the questions I had about the private property and how much land was going in and out. I think the one question that I have, so in sort of looking at my district, I've heard this statement about how this plan is contiguous and how it sort of is an entire network that's connected all the way through. Yet I look down the Pasadena Peninsula, and basically from Fort Smallwood Road east, there is no connection to the rest of the county. There's sort of this huge chunk of nothing there, and then all of a sudden we jump back into more sort of protected areas and not yet protected, et cetera. So I'm just not quite clear on sort of how it's contiguous all the way through. I've heard you say that we're sort of biting around the edges, taking some of these properties out, but I'm looking at the layer that's the red layer of removed from the draft network that you did, and in fact I see a number of places, even just looking in my district, that were in the middle of other parcels already. I'm looking at one in particular up off Solly Road, where there are a couple places that it was pulled out of areas that were already protected, or that were areas that are now being added to the new plan, but that are not yet in the conservation, in any kind of conservation status. So I think that's where I'm struggling with it, like, is this idea of, hey, there's complete contiguous parcels all the way throughout the county, because I'm not seeing that. And I'm also struggling with the idea that every single piece that was pulled out was sort of non-essential to the plan, and it's not impacting the integrity of the plan, what's pulled out. So I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that, but those are concerns that I have just looking at the removed, what's in there.
So Pete Barron, I'll defer to the experts on how the environmental science works.
Sure. Again, Michael Stringer with Office of Planning and Zoning. It's hard for me to speak to specific properties just off at the table here, but looking at the map from the plan, Figure 12, at the Fort Smallwood area, I think what you're seeing there is just the size of Fort Smallwood and some of those adjacent areas themselves are large enough to meet that 250-acre threshold for being included in the network. We also looked at connectivity along waterways, so if they're along shorelines, we gave some allowance for connectivity that way.
I got you. That's what I was going to make a joke about if you got in a paddle canoe or something and you went down the stream, you could connect to it, but clearly that is what you were thinking. So, okay, got it.
All right, I'm going to jump in here for a second and just add some comments. I certainly appreciate the idea of giving notice to our constituents and giving folks the opportunity to be heard and make decisions about their own property, but I also feel like we need to be clear. We're not taking away the opportunity for any property owner to make decisions about their property. I think we've stated that clearly. Our amendment, the amendment we just passed, reaffirms that. And what we do need to do is create a plan. So we could, I'm going to use an analogy. So if you took a pallet or took a canvas and you blindly allowed people to walk up and just put, dots wherever they felt like it on the canvas, well, that's what you might end up with if you don't actually plan, if you don't sit there and say, okay, we're going to make this shape here and we're going to make this shape here and these lines are going to connect. That's a plan. A plan is not just throwing darts at the wall, which is I think what we would end up with if we could have thrown this out to every property owner in the whole county and said, hey, opt in or opt out. But then we wouldn't end up with the contiguous nature of large parcels, not all, as Mr. Volke very appropriately mentioned, but small parcels are also valuable. So, I'll tell you, there's parts of the city of Annapolis. The city of Annapolis, which I represent, is a lot of it's going to be difficult to, have large sections of green infrastructure that are connected together because it's already very developed. But that's not to minimize the importance of putting green spaces in the places that we can have them. We also need to be realistic that we have to address climate change. And yes, this needs to happen on a global scale, but there's, the thing that we all learned in elementary school, or I hope we all learned in elementary school is, think globally, act locally, and we are charged with acting locally. This is our job. We are elected to make plans for things, and sometimes making hard decisions about how do we make sure that the things that are important for our community are present in the future. And if we just, kind of leave it all to chance and leave it all to individual landowners, we won't have that. We won't have a cohesive plan. And so I have to vote against this amendment. It's really up to us. We were tasked with this job, and we can. I actually feel like it's quite easy given all of the different outs that a property owner has. A property owner can, they're not giving up any rights. This is really just, the way I see it is it's a very transparent way of telling the county, telling the residents, these are the places that we know we have an opportunity for conservation in large parcels or small parcels. And it's, it's not saying we can't have development in those spots. It's just saying, hey, this is where the county is going to prioritize trying to get easements, trying to purchase land for conservation purposes to the extent that we can. I don't feel like, we have to allow folks to opt out because they're not opting out of anything. It's just the county stating the priorities, stating what's important. And for that reason, I feel like I just can't support this amendment because I think it really undermines the plan itself and really is a way of shirking our duties as a council to kind of look out collectively for the council or for the county. Go ahead, Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was sitting here thinking, because again, I was on small area plans years ago, not on the committee, but going to the hearings. And I'm just thinking about how far the county has come with GIS and the ability for a individual resident. I had somebody call me the other day and they were asking me about, hey, I looked up that this gas station is C4 and I want to buy it, and I'm like, before you couldn't even get it 10 years ago when we had the master plan. So we have also provided that access, again, to the benefit, from there. And I just want to get back, because this is about the public notice piece. Can the administration again reiterate how was this shared? I know I saw a lot of emails going back and forth from different groups or other things, but kind of put out there, because I don't want an assumption to be made that this was swept under the carpet and nobody knew it was going on. I mean, I saw discussions in my own next door chat. Don't go on there for other stuff. Believe me, you'll find out about car washes and Lord knows what else. But again, if you could just, for the benefit of the public, how was this discussed, shared, how many meetings, like the interaction, that'd be helpful, because that kind of puts out there, what the interaction was.
I'm sure Mr. Stringer counted.
Yes, and we documented it in the appendix to the report. Appendix A is a public involvement summary. We also have this documented on the website with notes and from all the outreach that was conducted. To give a brief overview, I'll even go back in time a little bit. We actually started work on this plan in 2017 before we began working the general development plan. There were a couple of public open houses then. then we reinitiated this at the beginning of 2021. We had online surveys, and the way that we advertise this, and we're trying to figure out how to do this better every time we go out to the public. We have a strong commitment to try to improve our public engagement and expand our public engagement. So we worked a lot. We had to be online, of course, because of the pandemic. So we began with online surveys. We advertised that through contact lists that we developed through all the outreach that had happened for the General Development Plan. We also worked with the administration to be able to put out information through the Office of Community Engagement and Constituency Services. They have a weekly newsletter that goes out to, I believe, around 5,000 residents. We partner with our sister departments like Recreation and Parks and Bureau of Watershed that have Facebook and Twitter accounts to get things spread out that way. We also reached out to sister agencies like AAEDC so that Arundel Ag could use their newsletter and their spaces, as well as the Farm Bureau, Soil Conservation District. We reached out with Communities of Hope to reach out to underserved communities. We put information in their newsletters to get things out. So every time we would have a public event, we'd kind of reach out to this network we had developed of partner organizations to boost the announcement through their social media and newsletters. So again, began with online surveys in spring of 2021. There was the Department of Recreation and Parks had their online survey as well for the Land Preservation Parks and Recreation Plan. They had a much bigger platform. It's a more prominent question of where do you want to park versus green infrastructure. So we had questions inserted there too about land conservation and the public's interest in that. So we started with just general sentiment of educating people about what green infrastructure is, how do they support public investment in it. Then we had virtual public forums. We met with the Citizens Environmental Commission multiple times from February through June. We had a virtual public forum in April of last year. We also participated and put information out when the Department of Recreation and Parks had their virtual public forums, a series in each council district last June and July. During that time, we also had small group meetings, as I mentioned before, with partners in conservation at the land trusts and state and federal agencies, as well as with development interests from MBIA, NIOP, and the county realtors. We made a round of presentations at county boards and commissions like Recreation Advisory Board, Forestry Board, Transportation Commission, Bike Commission, Agricultural Preservation, Ag Tourism. And then we had our as I mentioned, some public outreach in person over the summertime when we got out to some farmers markets and fairs to actually talk to some folks in person. Then we had our formal public comment period in the summertime that ran from August through September. We had the plan available for approximately 45 days online. Again, we announced that through all those different networks. We made the plan available to be able to view on our website. We had the interactive map available that people could comment on and put those dots specifically on parcels to talk about whether they supported that being there, want us to add things, want us to remove things. After that period, we analyzed all those comments and prepared the revised draft that then went to the Planning Advisory Board. Again, announced that out, that was available for public comment and public testimony. Planning Advisory Board had their review process in November. And then we, again, revised the plan based on Planning Advisory Board's comments and brought it to the council.
Thank you for that very detailed explanation.
Told you.
Seeing no additional lights, I'm just going to make one last comment, and then I think we should call the roll because I think we've all had an opportunity to speak here. But, you know, as the council, we're charged with representing all different kinds of things, and sometimes those things are competing. You know, we're charged with representing, making sure that the rights of individuals are not, steamrolled. We are also charged with making sure that we're looking out for the collective good of our county. And I feel like this plan really leaves a lot, that leaves actually very wide leeway in terms of individual rights, while also looking at the collective good, looking at what do we need to go forward that's the best for the whole of our community. So for that reason, I have to vote against this, even though I do certainly appreciate the idea of notice. I feel like we're not we're not taking away anything from anyone. If we were, then I would feel differently, but we're really not. So, Ms. Lacey wants to chime in. You may go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thoughts occur, as others are speaking. But I was listening to what you said. And what I think we have, I'm going to guess from my colleagues' comments, I think we all agree in general with the plan. We agree with conservation as a principle. We agree with, our need to take action to fight climate change and to improve our environment as, hosts for the monarchs and all the other things that we could say. We just don't quite agree about how to go about it. And I'm looking for a way forward that lets me vote in accordance with my conscience, because that's important to me. I think I'm struggling here because I feel this amendment is a reasonable choice. It's just a question of whether it's a choice that the majority wants or not. And what I don't know, sitting here right now, is whether a majority wants what I want, which is to bring the 53 properties back in, because I don't think they had a right to be taken out in the first place. And in the same way that when we did the GDP and we went over the appendices at the back and we went over each of those properties and we had the chance to amend what OPZ had decided to do, I think we should be able to do that exact same thing here. I just wish I had realized and appreciated the consequences of that before now so that I could be prepared to do that today, and I'm not. I'm concerned that if I vote no on this amendment, it will fail, and I may not get those 53 properties in. And if I vote yes, I have leverage. So you see how I'm in a very difficult position? I don't want to use that leverage. I'm not trying to do anything other than find a way that we can publicly discuss how we can bring in 53 properties who didn't have the right to opt out, because that's what we've all agreed is what's happening here. It's guidance. Therefore, you didn't lose a right you didn't have in the first place. So I don't know that I have more to say on that. Perhaps Mr. Barron wants to comment because he's giving me a death stare, but
I wouldn't say that. I think I understand the concern around notice that was discussed earlier. I will also sort of recognize the principle that you're talking about the 53 properties, and I think it would be good for you to sit down with Mr. Stringer again to discuss what the specifics of each one of those were, because those were looked at in the whole of the plan. What I will say here is the legislative process is important, and remember, we've already amended the bill tonight. I think it would be unwise to vote for a bad amendment when there would be another opportunity where you can amend a bill at the next meeting, and the administration stands ready to sit down with you and talk just as we would with all 7 or 6 of your colleagues as we have on this plan going back to November around what it is, what it isn't, and how to get it right. So what I would argue is you have the opportunity to amend it later as a body at the next meeting, because this bill has to come back at the next meeting because we've already made an amendment, so it will be back.
Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important to remember when we were working on the GDP and land use change applications, what we called LUCAs, they were individual properties, but we were voting on both applications that had been submitted by individual property owners and then things that were writing the way properties was currently being used. So it was somewhat regulatory when you're changing the land use designation of someone's property. So it's not an apples to apples comparison in this map when we're talking about hubs and networks and corridors and voluntary and non-regulatory and conservation. So it's just not the same thing, and I just want to be clear about that. I think we all know that here, but I'm not sure the public understands that. So I just wanted to reiterate that for folks watching at home. Thank you.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. So I think dubbing this amendment as a bad amendment to me is just not fair, because I'm focusing on the notification aspect of it. I understand the argument and discussion over option opt-out, but I think the sooner and the earliest you can notify a property owner that they are being included in a map that could at some point in the future, given many different factors, become a regulatory document, I think it just allows property owners to be aware and pay attention well in advance of any future action being taken. We look at regulatory items on private property right now, like forest conservation. I'll give a personal example. I have half of my property is in a forest conservation easement. To cut down a tree, we have to go through a lengthy process. We've only removed the dead ones that are threatening our property, by the way. But it is not easy. We don't have a lot of use of our land, and that's something that when we purchased our home, we had to sign off that I accept and I acknowledge that this is part of the agreement with my land, and we know to pay attention to any changes. And I just think it's, for any property owner, the earlier you know, the better. So the notification aspect for me is really important.
So if I may respond, Madam Chair. Again, and I think Mr. Kaisigler gave a pretty good rundown of all the steps that would need to be taken. Any difference between your property now, when you purchased it, there are regulatory restrictions because of the forest conservation easement that's already on the land when you purchase the property. This map doesn't add any regulatory restrictions. Any future restrictions would need to go through a full public process. The county council would have to act. And as Mr. Kaisigler talked about, significant steps would have to be taken to change what's currently in this plan.
Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, during the GDP process, we passed a plan with maps for critical corridors, critical economic corridors, preservation, neighborhood, they were preservation areas, all kinds of designations of land without notifying every single property owner that now your neighborhood or your home is in a neighborhood preservation area or in a critical economic corridor. It's the same thing, if not even less regulatory. This is ridiculous. Okay, I'm done.
Madam Secretary, please, I'm sorry, I lost my spot. We're on amendment number 3. Okay. 2. Oh, 2. Okay. Sorry, we're still on number 2. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 2.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Nay.
Ms. Pickard.
Nay.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Nay.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Nay.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. I'm sorry, I can't read my own handwriting. Amendment number 2 has failed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read amendment number 3.
Amendment number 3. This amendment clarifies the effect of the Green Infrastructure Master Plan on planned land use and development.
Ms. Hare, again, this is your amendment. You may make a brief statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. This actually similar to amendment number 1 from Councilwoman Pickard and Councilman Volke. Just gives some clarification as to how this interacts with the general development plan and the regional plans, and that it's not superseding it in any way. It's very short. I think it's self-explanatory, but with that, I would ask for your support.
Is there a motion? Oh, is there a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt, thank you.
Second.
All right, Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The administration is comfortable with this amendment. We're not just saying no, I think. It's a good add, and it'll help provide some clarity. We're comfortable with this language as we were with the other amendment and the half a dozen or so other references in the plan.
Any other comments from my colleagues? I'm just going to add that I appreciate that it mentions specifically how this connects with the general development plan, and I'm sorry, is it the LR? I'm sorry, the regional plans. I like that. I think that, someone pointed out to me, and maybe it was you, Ms. Hare, when we were speaking earlier today, that this could, head off legal confusion in the future. So I actually appreciate this amendment. Any additional comments from my colleagues? All right. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 3.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 3 is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Bill number 8-22 as amended will be heard on March 7th, 2022. All right, moving on to bill number 9-22. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 9-22.
Bill number 922, an ordinance concerning personnel, classified service, benefits, holidays, Juneteenth.
This is an administration bill. Mr. Barron, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Joining me is our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer, Pete Hill. Ms. Badowski, our Personnel Director, is here, as well as Deputy County Attorney Lori Blair-Glassmeyer. I think we discussed this bill at the work session. Just to remind council, 922 establishes Juneteenth as a county holiday. As you may recall, with the issuance of Executive Order 48 last year, the county executive pledged to introduce legislation making Juneteenth a county holiday. In 2021, Governor Hogan declared a state holiday for Juneteenth. Today, we're bringing forward 922 to make good on the county exec's promise. As you all know, I don't think I need to teach history here, and I'm definitely not qualified to do so. Juneteenth celebrates the end of slavery in the United States on June 19th, 1865. General Granger issued General Order Number 3 declaring all enslaved persons within Texas are free under the Emancipation Proclamation. This holiday gives our county an opportunity to pause and reflect on our nation's history and work to make a better county for all. Hope you will support the bill.
Mr. Pruski.
Mr. Barron, for the record, there are 2 people that serve on the council that are registered to teach, so. But thank you for this amendment, and thank you. I know that some of the labor unions and others reached out to me with negotiations, and this is clarifying, so this is helpful overall, but also for the intent of the bill, that recognizing what you just stated, but thank you.
All right, we will now open the public hearing on Bill 9-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
Yes, Madam Chair, we did receive one submission through the online testimony tool. It went to the entire council. It's included in the summary that's posted online and is added to the record.
Thank you. We will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council on Bill number 9-22. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. We have one speaker signed up, Jennifer Sell. You may come down to the table. When you are ready, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Sell, and I still live at 444 Linwood Drive, Severna Park, Maryland. I am asking you to vote in favor of Bill 922. Making Juneteenth a county holiday is a step in the positive direction and acknowledging America's history and allowing county workers the time to remember and celebrate accordingly. However, if the county only makes Juneteenth a holiday, it does not take further steps towards increasing equity within the county, then the holiday becomes a symbolic act. Additional steps would include ensuring equitable employment among county employees to include teachers and staff at local schools. Creating an environment in which Black children are able to see teachers who look like them is a crucial step in creating an environment in which all of our students feel welcome and safe. In addition, the county should take all steps to ensure the county has equitable hiring to ensure representation from the demographics that make up its constituency. For this reason, I recommend voting yes on this bill, as well as taking additional steps to increase equity within the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops. Pardon me. If there's anyone else here who would like to speak, you may come down to the table at this time. All right, seeing no additional movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 9-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9-22.
Bill number 922, an ordinance concerning personnel, classified service benefits, holidays, Juneteenth.
Mr. Volke. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually going to ask Mr. Gibson this question. He and I had an opportunity to go back and forth earlier today with some questions I had sort of about this bill, but more generally about county personnel costs. Mr. Gibson, I'd ask you what the county's cost is roughly per workday if you look at the total personnel services that we have for the county, and then you divide it by 52 weeks times 5 days, so 260 work days a year. What is the typical cost per day in terms of county payroll?
Hi, Terry Gibson, Assistant County Auditor. It's roughly about, we calculated according to recent personnel records as of February 2nd, it's roughly about $2 million per day.
Okay, and I think you indicated to me that includes FICA and insurance and some of those other payments that the county's making in addition to just the money going to people's pocket.
Yes, it would be salary and benefit costs.
Okay. So I guess this question is probably for personnel, Ms. Badowski, but with respect to this increase, I think this is actually taking the county's number of recognized holidays from 15 to 16. Currently, I think there are 12 sort of static holidays. There are 3 floating holidays. This is going to increase the number of static holidays to 13 with 3 floating, so that would take us up to 16. Is that accurate?
Doesn't want to go on, sorry. Ann Badowski, Personnel Officer. We no longer have floating holidays. Those were converted into personal days. Okay, just for clarification. Yeah, and yes, so it does add an additional holiday to the list.
Okay, yeah, and so that's, for me personally, and I'll just say this, the struggle I'm having is this is about a $2 million price tag on this bill in terms of there's another day that now county employees will not necessarily be able to serve the public because they are not working in the county. So while I did support the resolution that Councilwoman Rodvian put up back in 2019 that recognized Juneteenth we didn't recognize it as a holiday per se in terms of an official county holiday, but we did recognize it as a day that is worth being remembered and make sure that we recognize that day. The concern I have is it's a pretty expensive bill, and in reading the fiscal note that the budget office put out, there's really no mention of what the cost is, so that was why I did this sort of back-end legwork to figure out what the cost would be. So that's one of my big concerns. I don't know if there's anybody at the table who wants to speak to the costs of this bill in terms of the time off, but that's a concern I have.
Go ahead, Mr. Barron.
Yeah, Pete Barron. I think I don't necessarily agree with the math on this. I mean, we have snow days. The county work still gets done. The citizens of the county will still be served. This is an important holiday to recognize. I don't think that there's a concern that this will add any cost, and I think you see the numbers from the budget office in the fiscal note that this will not cost county taxpayers any additional money.
I'm sorry, did you want to follow up?
I did.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The problem I have with the fiscal note, Mr. Barron, is there are no numbers. In reading it, it sort of makes a number of references to statutory provisions in the code, but it doesn't actually give any analysis in terms of the cost, which is why I had to go and try to come up with another way to quantify what the cost is on this bill. So that's the concern. But I wanted to follow up on one thing you said. You said that you don't expect that this will be a day that people aren't working. At least
I
that was
didn't
what
say
heard
that.
you say.
I said that the people's business will still be taken care of.
Okay.
Police officers don't get holidays off.
Sure.
Firefighters don't get holidays off. The critical services of the county are going to be provided for.
Sure, I get that, but I'm assuming inspections and permits, Office of Planning and Zoning, Office of Law, some of the other core functions of government aren't going to be working on this day. Is that fair?
It will be a county holiday.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Mr. Pruski.
Madam Chair, I'm going to show my age again. It's been a while, but we go and do collective bargaining. Defenders Day used to be on the books. It's no longer here. There's 2 or 3 other holidays that are there, and we've done collective bargaining for a while. And there's, like I said, since I've been here, I think we've gone up and down, if I'm not mistaken, or even prior to that. So I don't know about collective bargaining as far as how that works or what fits in, but even with time, like you said, people are putting in leave or other things like that. So as Mr. Barron pointed out, I don't think it's going to have the fiscal note that we're saying unless everyone uses. I'm just trying to understand that as far as negotiations. Maybe you can give a little history. I'm not sure if you know, but again, for those of you that don't know about Defenders Day, it's only celebrated in the state of Maryland, the city of Baltimore, and Baltimore County, but Arundel celebrated it, even though it's not even a part of what's there. Juneteenth is a national holiday, as we would back on, and I'm not going to get into why, which we should, but if you can just tell me from the collective bargaining piece, what has been added, what's been removed, because that's my understanding as a part of negotiations, that's also there.
Ann Badowski, Personnel Officer. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of history with it. I only have about 1 year sitting here, 1 round of negotiations, and we haven't done that. But I believe when we did remove the floating holidays and convert them to personal days, that those numbers also got negotiated as that number moved. So,
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I just was thinking about the fact that it's a national holiday. It's my understanding, maybe Office of Law can correct me on this if I'm incorrect, but it's my understanding when it passed to become a national holiday, it was something like 415 to 14, right? It passed overwhelmingly bipartisan support. I think all 8 Maryland congressmen supported it.
Lori Blair, Class R, Deputy County Attorney. I can't say that I followed the vote. I apologize.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I think that was my research.
I could Google it.
Yeah, I think we'll have to Google the count.
Oh, Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. So assuming this bill passes this evening, this does not prevent a county employee who decides on their own accord to sit down and do some work. That would still be allowable if they chose to. Yes? No?
You can do whatever you want on your paid time off.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
I'm just going to argue philosophy for a second here because I think that's where missing the big picture. We could talk about cost, and I actually feel like the $2 million figure is probably a little overblown, considering that so many of our county employees are 24/7, 365-day a year employees. But I feel like we need to be celebrating this holiday. I spent, as I'm sure plenty of people in the room did, completely oblivious to how the 4th of July is for African Americans. And then, thankfully, there's actually somebody who wrote a really famous speech on that topic, what is the 4th of July? And this, to me, is an important, is in a way, a more important landmark because it starts to get the founder's dream on paper right. Did it get it all right? No. Have we done that yet in 2022? No. We have work to do. But this is a huge milestone in terms of getting the words right on paper. And unless you have the dream, unless you have the vision, you're never going to get to the goal. And this is a great step, a huge important step that we've overlooked for a long time in American history that deserves to be given the day of celebration that it is worth. And I'll tell you, if you didn't come to the Juneteenth celebrations in the city of Annapolis last year, please come. It was one of the most fun, just celebratory weekends that I can remember in a long time. So obviously I'll be supporting this bill. All right. Is there any, seeing no further discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Nay.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Bill number 922 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill number 10-22.
Bill number 1022, an ordinance concerning approval of private disposition of county-owned properties being part of Old Admiral Court in Annapolis, Maryland.
Mr. Barron, this is again an admin bill. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. From Office of Central Services, we have Mr. Walker and Mr. Daniels with me, and Ms. Niederer from the Office of Law. Bill 1022 approves the sale of 2 surplus properties to 7-Eleven Bestgate Partners, LLC, for a total of $25,000. The total acreage of the surplus properties is 0.2744 acres. It's 2 parcels. One is 0.10 acres and one is 0.1715 acres. These properties went through the surplus process, and you now have the ordinance in front of you to approve the disposition of these properties. Hope you'll move the bill.
Any questions from my colleagues? All right, we will now open the public hearing on Bill number 10-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive anything.
All right, we will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council on Bill number 10-22. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. Noting that no one signed up ahead of time, is there anyone here in the audience who wishes to address the council on this bill? Seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 10-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 10-22.
Bill number 1022, an ordinance concerning approval of private disposition of county-owned properties being part of Old Admiral Court in Annapolis, Maryland.
Any further discussion? I'll just say a quick thank you to those of you who came to sit at the table who've been waiting for a while, and you're still here, so thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 10-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 1022 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill number 11-22.
Bill number 1122, an ordinance concerning current expense budget, Board of Education supplementary appropriation.
And Mr. Barron, again, this is an admin bill. While the other members of your panel are coming down to the table, you may have the floor.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have Mr. Shagnovich and Mr. Stansky, right? Yep. And Ms. Blair Klausmeyer. 1122 makes supplementary appropriations to the Board of Education from unanticipated grant revenues totaling $63 million. The vast majority, nearly $62 million, is coming from federal grants. The remaining $1.7 million comes from state grants. If you take a look at the fiscal note, you'll see the breakdown of where the money's going. We also have our experts from the Board of Education here. And again, this is money for this fiscal year that is unanticipated grants. There is no cost to the county taxpayer. Hope you'll move the bill.
Thank you. And Mr. Pruski, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Per ethics protocol, my spouse is an employee in the school system. For the disclosure, I just want to put that out there as I vote on any other bill, and just want to make that as a part of the record. Thank you.
And I will make the similar disclosure that I am a part-time teacher for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, but I don't think I actually am impacted in any way by this bill. All right. Any questions from the council? All right, we will now open the public hearing on Bill number 11-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive any submissions.
Thank you. We will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council on bill number 11-22. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. Once again, we did not have anyone signing up ahead of time, but if there is anyone here who wishes to testify on this bill, you may come up at this time. All right, seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on bill number 11-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 11-22.
Bill number 1122, an ordinance concerning current expense budget, Board of Education, supplementary appropriation.
Any further discussion? Seeing no lights, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number 11-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 1122 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of bill number 12-22.
Bill number 1222, an ordinance concerning capital budget and program, Board of Education, security-related upgrades and maintenance backlog capital projects, supplementary appropriations.
And once again, this is an administration bill. Mr. Barron, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And once again, I have our experts from the Board of Education, Mr. Shagnovich and Mr. Stansky, and Ms. Lori Blair-Klausmeyer from the Office of Law. 1222 amends the FY22 capital budget program by making supplementary appropriations to the Board of Education security-related upgrades and maintenance backlog capital projects. The appropriations come from state IAC grant funds totaling just over $1 million. And again, if you have any questions, the experts at the panel will be happy to answer them. Hope you'll move the bill tonight.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, do we have any, I'm sorry, we will now open the public hearing on bill number 12-22. Madam Secretary, have we received any testimony from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive any submissions of testimony.
Thank you, and we will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council on bill number 12-22. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes, and we did have one person signed up, and it's Carolyn Smith. Are you Ms. Smith? All right, you beat us to the punch. You have 2 minutes. State your name and address for the record.
In Severna Park.
You may continue.
I want to begin my testimony by saying that not all of the students I have taught in my 30 years at Severna Park High School and Broadneck Senior were like Amanda Fiedler and Heather Bagnall, who I've had the pleasure of having in my class while at Broadneck. A boy had been expelled from Annapolis Senior High, and he was assigned to my class at Broadneck. I witnessed him making a drug deal, but they gave him one more chance. When he assaulted me in class while I was teaching because I would not return the note he was passing to another student during class, he was finally removed from all of Anne Arundel County Public Schools. A gentleman from the Board of Education came to a conference room at Broadneck and informed me of my rights to contact the police. I was too scared, as this student was connected to very bad people in the community of Annapolis who might harm me or my husband and son. I saw the article in the paper when he was sent to jail for attempted murder in Annapolis. It was in the Evening Capital. It was on the right page at the top, and the article was that large. I finally had closure to that assault. Rules have changed now, as now I'm pretty sure teachers must be informed if a student is awaiting trial in our court system. Being informed would not really have helped my situation. It would just have made me more frightened of him. The second assault was a few years later. It was in one of the new computer classrooms after Broadneck High School got the much-needed addition in the late 1990s. I had called this girl's parents many, many times for very poor attendance and not completing her work. We were lucky if we could get her in the building 2 or 3 days a week. You see, she was using drugs. She threw an object at me during class and it hit my neck, where marks were left 10 days later. I will never forget how she and a couple of her friends laughed loudly in my class when she hit her target. That was in April, and my first panic attack happened on my second day of summer vacation in 1998. After a most enjoyable day in Harper's Ferry, I saw a doctor, and as stated in my email to each of you this morning, my 30th year was spent seeing a variety of doctors, many tests, testimonies, psychiatrists, psychologists, not doing what I loved, teaching my students. Whenever a bill comes up, I beg you, I hope you remember my story and do all that you can to protect our administrators, our teachers, and our students.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
You're welcome.
Before we close the public testimony, is there anyone else here who wishes to speak? If so, you may come up. Seeing no movement at this time, the public hearing on Bill number 12-22 is now closed. Ms. Smith, you are dismissed from the panel. Thank you again very much. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 12-22.
Bill number 1222, an ordinance concerning capital budget and program, Board of Education security-related upgrades and maintenance backlog capital projects, supplementary appropriations.
Is there any further discussion? Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. Ms. Smith, I just want to tell you that you were a wonderful teacher. Thank you for coming out and sharing your story tonight. You're an even better human being.
All right, seeing no further discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 12-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 1222 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the bill, or please read the title of Bill number 13-22.
Bill number 1322, an ordinance concerning finance, taxation, and budget, personal property tax credits and exemptions, reduction in assessment, qualified data center personal property.
Mr. Pruski, this is your bill. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a work session on this bill, and I know sometimes people don't watch the work session, but I think there's value in describing the purpose and intention of this bill. Sometimes when we have policies in our county, we have to remain competitive. And there are several surrounding counties that have finance, taxation, and budget personal property tax credits and exemptions for data centers. For those of you that don't know, the National Security Agency is in my district, along with many other contractors that certainly would benefit from this bill. And also, as discussed at the work session, the impact of a data center versus another commercial entity is a lot less. And I believe that this bill will allow Anne Arundel County to remain competitive, and I hope that my colleagues will do the same in their vote this evening. Thank you.
Is there any response from the administration?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I got a couple of people here with me. I'm going to do my best to introduce everybody. Ben Burge, our Director of Economic Development, along with Weston McQuillam and Sarah Horta from his team, Ms. McQuaid and Ms. Penley from Finance, Ms. Blair Klausmeyer from Law. Also, Councilman Pruski invited Mr. Stachnik. There we go. See? Usually they spell it out phonetically for me, sir. Want to thank the sponsor for working with the administration in the development of this bill, echo many of the sentiments he raised about the value, the good paying jobs, and the limited impact on traffic and our infrastructure that these businesses bring to the county. They're an important part of the future economy, and we think this tax credit strikes the right balance. Administration strongly supports Bill 1322, and our folks from Economic Development or the other folks at the table are free to weigh in if you want to add anything, Mr. Burge.
Thank you, Pete. Again, Ben Burge with Economic Development Corporation. I think you've heard a good summary from both Councilmember Pruski and Mr. Barron. Just want to, as I stated in the work session, just remind folks that 2 years ago during the 2020 legislative session, there was a bipartisan support bill passed and the governor signed a bill allowing local jurisdictions to provide discounted personal property tax that's different from real property taxes. Real property taxes are not touched in this bill. The state only allows real property taxes. That's basically the stuff inside the building, as I shorthand call it. And as soon as that bill was signed by the governor, Howard County and Prince George's County quickly seized the opportunity and passed legislation that provides a schedule of tax breaks to qualified data centers. And we are supportive of this bill just to level the playing field with some of our competing counties. As Mr. Pruski said, there are some good paying jobs. There's also some very good construction jobs. And though the jobs are good, directly related, it's the spin-off commercial activity from these data centers where the county will really see a lot of benefit, in addition to the taxes that the individual facilities will provide. And because there's a small number of employees in each data center, it's not going to have a big impact on traffic. You won't have to widen lanes or add traffic lights or anything like that. So be happy to answer any questions and certainly offer the opportunity to, for my colleagues, Mr. McQuillam or Mr. Stacknick. I would add that Ms. Horta really wanted to be here tonight. She has been so anxious to get this bill passed for a while now, but she is very sick today and couldn't make it. So hopefully she's watching on TV and cheering us on. Anyone to add on the? Okay.
Any questions from my colleagues? All right. Once again, thank you very much to the panel for coming here. We will now open the public hearing on Bill number 13-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive anything ahead of time.
We will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council on Bill number 13-22. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. We, again, did not have anyone sign up to speak on this bill, but if there is anyone in the audience who wishes to speak, you may now come up to the table. Seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 13-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 13-22.
Bill number 1322, an ordinance concerning finance, taxation, and budget, personal property tax credits and exemptions, reduction in assessment, qualified data center, personal property.
Is there any further discussion? Thanks again for coming here and being ready to answer our questions. And I know a lot of you answered our questions in previous conversations and at the work session, so thank you again. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 13-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 1322 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill number 14-22.
Bill number 1422, an ordinance concerning public safety, distribution of literature to purchasers of guns or ammunition, violations.
Mr. Volke, this is your bill. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As discussed at the work session, this would basically take fines for failure to distribute the literature that is now required under county code when someone purchases a firearm and take them to a Class E instead of a Class C offense. It's a pretty minor change. The offense amounts, the fines would go down a bit, but I think that nobody was expecting a whole lot of money off of these fines as they pertain to the current amounts, and I don't think anybody's expecting a lot of money off these fines with the change changed amount if it happens. So I won't belabor the point, but I do think that it makes sense. The intention, as I heard from everyone who was talking about this legislation and adding this provision that when a firearm is purchased, there needs to be this literature about suicide prevention. The concern was that it is not punitive, and the purpose is not to punish anybody for not doing it. It's to educate and make sure that gun sellers or firearm sellers are giving this literature out. So I basically have taken this to the lowest level of a fine. It's a progressive fine. There are 3 steps. The first offense, I think, is $50, and it's like $100 and then $500 for subsequent offenses. So there's a significant enough financial hit for a seller of firearms that if they're failing to comply with this, it will allow them to understand quickly that they need to be compliant with the law. So with that, I would ask for my colleagues' support.
Mr. Barron, would you like to respond for the admin?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Pete Barron, and I have Ms. Blair Klausmeyer sticking with me. So, as I got incorrect at the work session, this is Councilwoman Rodvian's bill we would be changing. And when there was a lot of discussion when the bill was crafted about what the right level would be, and I think reasonable people can disagree, but the administration is comfortable with Councilwoman Rodvian's bill, and we think that the bar for compliance is not high. We don't, as Councilman Volke stated, we don't expect a lot of fines, and the approach the administration will be taking is education first to get compliance, but we were comfortable with the Class C that was in Bill 10821, which was led by Chairwoman Rodvian.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Any questions from my colleagues? All right, we will now open the public hearing on bill number 14-22. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, nothing was received ahead of time.
All right, we will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council on bill number 14-22. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. Once again, no one signed up ahead of time to testify on this bill, but if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, you may come down to the table and state your name and address for the record. Seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on bill number 14-22 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 14-22.
Bill number 1422, an ordinance concerning public safety distribution of literature to purchasers of guns or ammunition violations.
Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number 14-22.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Nay.
Ms. Pickard.
Nay.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Nay.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Nay.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. Bill number 1422 has been defeated.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is there any other business to be brought before the County Council at this time? Mr. Volke.
Motion to adjourn.
Ooh, I wanted, you were about to second. I just want to very briefly ask everyone here and anyone listening to please keep the city of Annapolis and the young victims of last night's horrible shooting in their thoughts and prayers. So I just ask you, it's been a rough 24 hours, and hopefully we can go forward with health and healing and recovery. With that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Allison.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the motion carries. The County Council is adjourned until March 7th, 2022 for our next council meeting.